Welcome to the Education Scotland podcast. In every episode, we are joined by teachers, professionals and experts to unpack some of the big questions and topics facing the education sector in Scotland. Stay informed with the latest on education in Scotland by subscribing to our podcast.
Hello and welcome to this Education Scotland podcast, where we are going to be looking at the ITE pilot placement programme, and we are joined with our colleagues from the Royal Conservatoire. I'm Susan Doherty and I work with the Parents and Families team, and today I am joined by...
I'm Nicola Ewing and I'm a lecturer at the RCS in Glasgow.
And
Claire Hislop. I am the lecturer in education at RCS in initial teacher education.
so thank you so much for coming along today. We had your students in earlier and they were amazing. I'm not saying that's the bar we need to reach. But thank you so much, not just for coming along today, but being part of this pilot programme. We're really excited about it. So I guess I'm just going to ask you a few questions just to tease out your experiences of the programme. And the first one I suppose we need to start from is just tell us a wee bit about your involvement in the ITE placement programme with North Lanarkshire Family Learning Team.
Okay, so I first became aware of the pilot scheme for student teachers to experience a short placement with the North Lanarkshire Family Learning Team back in February 24 when I took up a new role as a lecturer in education at the Conservatoire. And I first started collaborating with yourself, Susan, and with Beverly. And you were brokering at that time this work between family learning teams and initial teacher education programmes, including ourselves and Strathclyde and UWS. So as the coordinator of the professional studies strands of undergraduate and postgraduate initial teacher education pathways at the Conservatoire, family learning and parental engagement seemed like important cross-cutting themes for us to pursue. But I was conscious that we're a much smaller provider of ITE and our focus is in core modules on being a music teacher in the secondary sector. So I was initially just conscious that we might have more limited scope for involvement than our colleagues from Strathclyde or UWS with their larger cohorts of primary undergrads. But we did find a meaningful context within our courses. And because the pilot placement would be focused on early years and primary and involve shadowing parental engagement initiatives and partnership and interagency working, we felt that Nicola's primary music elective course would be the best place to put this. And so we asked, what would it add to the student's experience? Would it sit meaningfully within the module learning outcomes and with the assignments? And if it felt like a good fit, would a 1 or a 2 or a 5-day mini placement be practical and perhaps in January 2025? And there was such good flexibility around the timing and the duration from the North Lanarkshire Family Learning colleagues, Leslie and Louise, and there was such a genuine appetite to make the pilot work. And that, of course, was in evidence when members of the Northland team came out to the Conservatoire just before Christmas to meet with our student teachers, David and Katie, and with Nicola. And so that face-to-face opportunity really gave us a chance to kind of shape and structure the day and build the relationships and get the buy-in of the student teachers themselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, you know, it was my job to sort of get my sort of primary music students prepared for this. So sort of during our sessions, discussed with David and Katie how it was going to work within the module and really the benefits that this would create for them on their teaching journey. And as usual, sold it with enthusiasm, all singing, all dancing, jazz hand mode a bit, you know, that's my personality. Because really, in theory, I was blown away that, you know, our students were really getting this amazing opportunity so early in their career, because it generates that big picture of the whole child, family life, parents as partners, society, you know. And by being part of this pilot scheme, David and Katie were both going to be at such an advantage on future placements in secondary schools. They're seeing beyond that sort of school gate. They're getting a deeper understanding of the strategies that are in place to allow the parents to be part of that learning community, breaking down the barriers. And, my goodness, just everything that we're sort of putting on paper at RCS, this was coming to life for them. So we all got on board, the three of us, David, Katie and Nicola, agreeing that it would be that amazing experience of seeing that bigger picture, working with the parental body and working with the external agencies so early in their teaching journey. The reason why primary elective module is building on prior knowledge and understanding in GIRFIC and inclusive practice, and it's allowing Katie and David to see in person how that parental body can really contribute to improving the outcomes for the children, the structure and the planning that's involved when community agencies work together, and to sort of reach achievable goals, and also the effective communication that is in place to achieve these goals. And it's building on that interagency GIRFIC pathway. So key components, we have reflection, collegiality, communication, and GIRFIC, which are key drivers for sort of both placements, career lifelong learning, and building on professional values, valuable transferable skills that can be used in the classroom and the community. Now, in that primary elective module, what happens is David and Katie we're going to be working with primary school children 1 day a week, teaching music. So it was that opportune moment for them to take this forward. What we sort of agreed upon, we're looking at reflective practice. They would keep a sort of reflective journal on both placements, making connections to GIRFIC and comparing and contrasting. And I think what blew it away for me, we had sort of check-in meetings between their primary placement in Ayrshire and also with the Northland team. This was sort of arranged in week 3, and they were just buzzing with the whole thing, sharing what they were involved in. And it was just amazing to see that enthusiasm jumping out at me. That practical element, bringing to life the policies and literature that they'd been engaged in through their time thus far at RCS, it was just a wow moment for me, total wow moment. We did, the placement married up nicely with the primary placement in January 25, and they were basically working with Louise and the team on all day on a Thursday and a Friday morning for 4 weeks. And really an amazing, valuable experience was had with the team and the parents, engaging in that professional dialogue with the staff, thinking about the aims and the goals. David and Katie were working with like a ukulele group and walking groups, and really seeing what the benefits are for those that are involved. Engaging in conversation with the parents, building relationships before they're actually leading the learning for adult learners in that ukulele session. And I think, again, what's amazing is getting access to Solihull training. That was a key point that Katie and David were both outlining to me. Amazing, a valuable tool really for their teaching journey and to share with others along the way. And, I think it was just incredible seeing that. I think what is important is when Louise came out, because when you're working with new groups of people, you've no idea if this is going to work or not. And I'll be completely honest, but she was fantastic. She came to our wee session, all 3 of us in a massive room at the Conservatoire, outlined what the North Lanarkshire CLD family learning team looked like in terms of their staffing structure, what groups the team worked with, and really discussed with David and Katie how they could potentially work in that environment, and if they had any suggestions, that the team would take on board and accommodate if so. I think the unique selling point, to be honest, actually was the ukulele and cake session on a Friday morning. That definitely sold it. And there was a question and answer session to put everybody at ease. And it really, at that point in time, the 12th of December, it's as if we had all been working together for years. And it cemented that relationship between our agencies. And, David and Katie were on board. And I think that's what is just so important with building relationships to get a pilot scheme to work.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Relationships is just the foundation of all of our works, even with the parents and families. But David and Katie did mention the visit from Louise, and they really valued the enthusiasm from yourself and from Louise, because and it set their expectations really, and it allowed them to probably feel more comfortable going out to what could be quite a different environment to what they were
Absolutely.
used to, but not feel nervous about it.
Yeah.
Because they had that initial chat with Louise and yourself.
Yeah.
So they said that they were just buzzing after that.
Yeah. And that is the word, is buzzing, because that
Yeah.
seemed to be sort of frequented. Every piece of the conversations that we had was buzzing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you might have already touched on these points already, but it would be good for us just to kind of tease out why do you think it is important for ITE students in particular, or even once they're in, the classroom, why is it important for them to gain knowledge and experience of parental engagement and family learning as a teacher?
Yeah, well, for me, family learning and parental engagement, they're recognising that parents and carers have roles as educators. And it promotes the importance of the family as being engaged as an equal partner in a child's learning. I think this is a key driver in achieving improved outcomes, raising attainment, closing the poverty-related attainment gap. For me, Nicola's already mentioned GIRFEC, this has its roots in getting it right for every child, but community learning and development just as a field of professional practice, it resonates for me with Freirean principles of critical pedagogy, or, to put it more simply, the belief that education is for the transformation of society for the better. So I think CLD approaches can only illuminate, as far as I'm concerned, the sort of professional values that we're trying to encourage in our early career practitioners. And it's great because although it's only 2 of our students that took part in the pilot, they've had the chance to reflect upon what they experienced, and they'll now disseminate that to their student teacher peer group. So, and I think the work that Katie and David have done, it does offer us a really powerful lens on social justice and the values from the standards. And I think that all of us that are practicing in the more formal educational realms, classrooms and schools and universities for that matter, we've probably got a lot to learn from CLD colleagues, just in terms of the way that programmes in that context are developed in dialogue with communities. And it's that sense of finding authentic ways to work with people who can be excluded from participation in the decisions that shape their lives. I think within your question there's a kind of hint that maybe it's not just student teachers that can benefit from a collaboration with CLD. And I would agree with that. I actually think that teachers at all stages of their career arc, it would be great if they had richer opportunities to be seconded or to do placements in other sectors, in other disciplines and contexts as part of their career-long professional learning. I mean, I think we've got quite good provision within the system for that at the moment, in terms of if you're looking to move into pastoral care, or if you're an aspiring middle or senior leader, that chance to go and shadow a colleague who's already in that role, it does exist. And I wonder if there could be similar scope for this kind of placement, and not just something that's done at the start of our career when we're a novice, so to speak. And I imagine that there could be a lot of more joined up thinking across the system if we regularly stepped out of our own context and went to shadow for, a day in the life of a primary head teacher, or an educational psychologist, or an FE lecturer, or a local authority probation manager, for example. Just getting to see the education system from another point of view.
I think that's a great. For me, it would really demystify what everybody does, where everybody fits into that puzzle, and how we can work together to support the young person, the children, the parent, the family in a more holistic way. Yeah, I think that's it. You really should be putting that forward to some of our ministers.
And I totally agree with that. I'm actually have been a product of that situation since 2013, where I worked part-time in schools as a primary teacher, but also as a primary music teacher. But I was also working part-time in various higher education establishments. So seeing that, it totally changes your classroom teaching perspective. Because I was like, I'm thinking about my reflective practice, my evaluative practice. My goodness, that changed considerably, because I was actually assessing student teachers when they were going out to deliver. It was really, incredible. And like coming into sort of working with family learning groups and parents and carers of the children in our schools, if you have that opportunity for qualified teachers to go out and be part of this, it allows the practitioners to essentially see barriers that parents and carers might face with educational establishments. You know, and that can relate back to their own educational experiences and, you know, how that could be impacting on their role as an equal partner in their child's education. You know, it allows the practitioner then to see, okay, what strategies are family learning and parental engagement programs offering to parent and carers, you know, to perhaps eradicate these barriers and equipping parents with that necessary skill set to support their children's learning, not just academically, but socially as well. I had an experience of this when I was in a school in West Lothian, where I was actually teaching French. So on a Friday morning, we had an open door French cafe for parents to come, and I would teach them the things that I was actually teaching their pupils. And it was absolutely incredible. It started off maybe 3 or 4, then it would maybe go to 10, but we always had coffee and cake. That's actually so this is going right through the whole thing.
No cake, croissant.
But, you know, it really worked because it allowed them to see what we were actually doing in school. And I think for me, one of the highlights of that key component was there was a lady who was part of our group. She didn't have a lot of confidence, and she actually worked in B&Q. And what she was actually saying to me, she came back 2 weeks later to say that she was able to read some of the information in French. Wow. And I could have cried, and she knew what it meant, like the colours. Like, because she actually openly admitted that she couldn't read with her child because she couldn't read. So actually having that in place for practitioners, I think is so vitally, vitally important. Yeah. I think, you know, and coming back like to David and Katie as well, what this whole pilot scheme opened for them was they could transfer their skill set, the knowledge and understanding from their RCS modules related to learning and teaching. They're able to then transfer that skill set into that more informal setting and working with adult learners. And it's building on skills, especially communication and confidence building, you know, what to take on board when they're going out into their sort of teaching journey in schools. And as I've just said, you know, many qualified practitioners, they've not had that experience. It's not there. So Katie and David, they're really ahead of the game before they start their probationary year. And, you know, this could actually potentially allow them to share that experience with probationers and whatever authority they choose to go to, you know, and I think that would be such an amazing opportunity for everybody involved.
And they actually spoke about the fact that when they went back to their peers, they were saying, oh, what was that? That sounds amazing. How do we, let's research that. How do we get involved in that? That sounds really, really good. So I was really pleased to hear that happened for them. So they said that you touched on a wee bit about the barriers. They actually touched on that as well, because these kids are not just coming in, you know, a pod, right? So they're coming with their family situation, whatever that may be. And as you alluded to, some parents have an issue with their own literacy and numeracy. So unless you are able to build that relationship with the parent and the family, you're never going to know, right? So you're never going to be able to then say, well, actually, within the community, within the college, within, you know, another sector, there's help, there's support, and let's get you involved in maybe a family learning programme. And what we've seen from the initial pilot, which was in Edinburgh, the teachers that went through the placement within a family learning team, they now run their own family learning programmes. So like the transferable skills make them feel, well, actually, I've learned these skills, we can work in partnership, but let me start a wee coffee morning. Let me start a wee, you know, programme where, you know, David can teach them how to blow into a bagpipe.
Or whatever. Play the ukulele or whatever. or like a choir, community choirs. A community transpire choir from this.
Absolutely.
It'd be amazing.
Absolutely. And we've seen that working really well across the country with the Dad's Rock, for instance. You know, it's a parent-led programme, but the kids are involved, the extended family's involved, and, you know, the impact is huge. For family learning, what we're trying to do is build the capacity of the whole family, right? So that, you know, children, young people and their parents and families can thrive, because unfortunately we're just not in that situation as a whole in Scotland. So for the students that were engaged in North Lanarkshire to feel that that's something that they believe in now, that they're sharing with their peers when they go back, you know, it's amazing. And it maybe leads me on to my next question, right? Which wasn't intentional, but I feel as if that's a good segue. This type of program, this type of pilot is quite innovative, right? So that we haven't done this before. So what impact do you hope this will have on the system as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've talked a lot already about the impact on the individual students that took part in this, and how fortunate they were, and how rare it is within initial teacher education for us to find the time to do anything beyond the kind of traditional placement experience, where really the emphasis is on the student teacher achieving the standard for provisional registration, working on their knowledge and understanding, their skills and abilities. It's often very focused on the subject specific classroom, as it should be. You know, we want our student teachers to be able to begin their career from a strong position when they go out and enter the teacher induction scheme. But what I think is that although that is our mainstay in initial teacher education, is to educate teachers and make them ready for the profession, I firmly believe that we are not teacher training organisations. We are teacher education. And I would go further and say we want to be offering a critical teacher education. And I think that pilots like this, if they were to be rolled out across ITE institutions in Scotland, would be really beneficial, because taking student teachers out of that formal classroom context, seeing young people through a different lens, and, you know, beginning to acknowledge that learning happens all the time for young people, not just in the classroom. We've got intergenerational learning, community learning, and the ways that parenting and caring for young people can positively impact on the learning of adults.
I think what Claire was saying, you know, it is very rare within a sort of ITE for students to get this great opportunity, but it's something that David and Katie will never, ever forget, and hopefully has built that foundation to drive it forward when they're fully qualified. And as I mentioned previously, in whatever authority that they are in, and, you know, who knows what avenues that might open for them in their career, you know. And as you were saying, you know, they're feeding it forward already to the student body, so it's going to grow arms and legs when they actually start their actual role, which I think is really quite incredible for it.
And we actually spoke about them being champions of family learning now. Because they get so much out of it.
Absolutely.
So I was really pleased. They were wonderful. They were so excited about the whole programme. So I guess the last question that I was going to really touch on was just about, you know, we're talking about rolling this out. So we've worked with yourselves, UWS and Strathclyde, and we're just going to do one with Aberdeen in a few weeks. So the idea is to have this as an opportunity across all ITE providers. What advice, given that you have taken part in it, what advice would you give to other ITE providers thinking about engaging with this type of placement in the future?
Yeah, so I think that my first piece of advice would be to find the right context for the work within your existing ITE programme. And for us, as we've discussed, that was within our primary music elective module with BEd Year 3 students. And that was the right fit for us because there was a folio detailing teaching and learning in a primary context, but also there was this reflective practice assignment. And so the work, that felt like the right place to situate this work. The next thing I would suggest to colleagues in ITE taking this forward would be to build a strong reciprocal partnership that will underpin the work so that it doesn't become a bolt-on or a one and done. So, for example, Susan, yourself and Beverly, you came out last year to RCS and you presented a conference paper to all 90 BEd and PGD students as part of our Professional Learning Week 2024. And that gave all of our students the context of the work, offering them the theory and the policy and the practical background of family learning and parental engagement. So I'm going to be really pleased to see that work come full circle this year when in Professional Learning Week 2025, David and Katie will have the chance to share their experiences with their peer group. So in that sense, 2 students participated in the pilot, but another 8 to 8 students are going to get to hear the highlights of that and build their professional knowledge of family learning and parental engagement. And as I said earlier, that opportunity to have the North Lanarkshire Family Learning Team come out to the campus a few weeks before the placement began, just another example of that sort of strong reciprocal partnership working. And to model that for student teachers is really powerful, because we're not just training subject specialist teachers to go into the classroom. We really want to inspire our early career practitioners to be of a mindset and to have strong professional commitment and values. And part of that is being a colleague. Part of that is coming out into a system to work collegiately with others and in partnership. And oftentimes when we look at that as a sort of standalone standard within the GTCS standard for provisional registration, we see, working as part of partnerships. And that can sometimes be the part of the kind of professional framework that's quite hard for our student teachers to imagine. Well, what does that look like? How do I go about evidencing my practice in that domain? And so we're given a really strong model there. And lastly, I think you've just got to find the right people to drive the thing forward, to get the sort of buy-in from the student teachers that I think you'll have found today from Katie and David. I think a lot of the success of this particular part of the bigger pilot has come from Nicola and the way that she secured the buy-in of the student teachers themselves. She's got this kind of infectious enthusiasm for life. She framed the work, she gave it context, she made it meaningful. And I think without her, we couldn't really have taken the work forward.
Very kind, Claire. I do like that sort of good jazz hands, children's TV presenter approach. But, on a more serious note, it is very much down to David and Katie. Their enthusiasm for that primary music elective module to start with. Every single week they would show up. They were the perfect fit. And I really knew that they were going to flourish in this this new venture. And, to come back to that original point you were saying, Claire, about, finding that right context to work with your existing programme, that's vital. It's absolutely vital, because it's not a bolt-on. You're building, as I've mentioned previously, you're building on that existing knowledge and skill set. So it's not as daunting for your students, thinking about David and Katie, what they had done beforehand, and they were just so enthusiastic, they could see the potential.
Yes.
There was maybe initially a barrier, but then they overrode that, which was really, really quite incredible. And again, coming back to that sort of partnership, I agree with everything that, you've said, Claire, and making it real and purposeful, that creates that opportunity for that student body to share the experience. And it creates that sense of ownership and fulfillment. And these are key words. They have this, that is that buy-in. It really is. So it's been a fantastic opportunity for everybody involved.
Yeah, and I think that the ownership and the buy-in started with yourself, though, because that's certainly what came through from the students.
That's great.
From yourself and from Louise coming out. So for them, that was the catalyst, right? So for other IT providers, we need to give them a wee sprinkle of
fairy dust. That's it.
Everybody needs a little bit of Nicola. If we could bottle Nicola and give a little bit of that to all IT institutions, would be grand.
Yes, absolutely. But I think it is an important point where if you weren't invested, how invested would the kids have been? Our students, I should call
indeed,
kids, I guess these days. But I think that's an important point.
And I think as well, I've been a teacher for 32 years.
Yes.
And very, very little opportunity. I actually just retired in February from my teaching job.
Wow.
So very, very early retirement. But I think that's why I was so sold on it, because that opportunity is not really out there.
Yes.
And it should be.
Yeah.
And our families are so important to make things work in our schools.
Yes.
Our kids, that's why we do our job.
Yes.
It's the kids that we're investing in, and we need the support of the parents and carers.
Yes.
And if we don't have that, we need to actually find ways to get our parents through the door, to make it work for everybody within the community. Yeah. And I think that's why that enthusiasm had shone through, because teaching's in my heart. It has been since goodness knows when.
Yes.
But it really was an amazing opportunity. Amazing.
No, that's great. That's great. And the other element to the enthusiasm is the leadership, isn't it? If you hadn't bought into it, it would have been a non-starter, I guess, but you were able to see the value very clearly. It was just the logistics, wasn't it?
It was the logistics, given our focus on secondary, yes. I think. But that's raised an important thing to reflect on for me, and that is that I think particularly in the secondary sector, we run the risk of being stuck within subject discipline silos. And it's maybe not such an occupational hazard in primary school because of the nature of primary. But I do think it's important that we start to get out of those silos, whether they're subject discipline ones or even sector, and start to do this kind of cross-sector shadowing. I think I've made a bit of a case for that this morning, but I really am keen that. And placement is the place to do it, because we can read all we want about the academic theory or the policy, but only by doing and seeing and being in a space can we really begin to understand and take things out of that kind of theoretical realm into the messy, exciting realm of real learners and real families and real practice. So, I've no doubt that many of the teachers that we work with in initial teacher education, they do go on to become very effective, fulfilled teachers of subject. But hopefully within a critical teacher education, they also become teachers of young people. And it becomes less about, I'm learning to become a teacher of music, and more about, well, what does it mean to be a teacher?
Correct. Yes. That's a beautiful way to end the podcast, I have to say. Unless there's any other gems you want to... No, I'm getting the shake of the head. Well, I suppose just to round off, I want to thank you guys for being involved in the pilot. I know Beverly and I have relied on the knowledge team for ITE providers quite heavily. But when we brought the pilot up, we had to say no to a lot of people just to kind of focus it down. So there is a willingness out there. There is an appetite for this type of placement programme. So we're delighted, and we thank you and your students for being part of it. So this is the end of this podcast for today. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll sign off now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for notification of when a new episode is published. If there is a topic you would like to hear featured on this podcast, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on our social media channels for all the latest news from Education Scotland. Education Scotland is a Scottish Government executive agency charged with supporting quality and improvement in Scottish education.